first role of Zainab salamullah alayha here is to inform people exact details. You look at the knowledge of Sayyidah Zainab, you look at the courage of Sayyidah Zainab, you look at the eloquence of Sayyidah Zainab, you look at the analysis of Sayyidah Zainab. Wallah, this is something that Allah had agreed with your grandfather the Prophet, that we face trouble, we face tragedy in order to serve Islam. Wallah, Allah will give power to people on this earth who will build graves over them, who will mark them one by one, who will tell people what they had done, and who will bring a generation of people who year after year will commemorate Hussein, and who will make this place a visiting place. Wallah, our story, this event, this tragedy of Karbala will never be forgotten. Do not worry, O my nephew, the story of Hussein, the message of Hussein will carry.
What a night it was for the daughters of the Messenger of Allah, whom lofty eminence never forsook ever since they were born. It was only yesterday that they lived in the pavilions of greatness and the chambers of dignity, lit during the day by the sun of prophethood, and during the night by the star of caliphate, and by the lanterns emitting the radiance of sanctity. During this night they were left in the pitch dark, having lost those shining lights, their belongings plundered, their chambers burnt, fear overwhelming them. They remained among the corpses of those who used to be their protectors. Now they have neither protectors nor defenders. They do not know anyone who could defend them if they were to be attacked, or who would repel those who might terrorize them, or who would calm and pacify those who have lost their loved ones. Yes, there were among them children crying in anguish. There were mothers of children waned by the arrows, sisters of those who were martyred, mothers who lost their sons, and they were mourning their dear ones. Next to them were body parts amputated, corpses slashed and cut, necks covered with blood.
When the Imam left after his departure, obviously it was very sorrowful for the women and children. You could imagine a bunch of women and children out in the middle of the desert, surrounded by enemy lines. This was a huge tragedy on their heart.
And so in order to further please Ibn Ziyad, after the killing of Imam al-Hussein and his companions, he orders that the bodies be decapitated, all the heads be removed and carried on spears, and then horses to trample the bodies in order to satisfy Ibn Ziyad. So there were 72, the narrations say, and each one announced himself, so they knew who they were looking for. Find the body of Hur, find the body of Burair, find the body of Habib, find the body of Ali al-Akbar. And they searched, and each time they found a body, they would behead, and they would carry aloft on a spear the head, the blessed head of each one of the shuhada. And then they lined up the bodies in such a way that horses would be able to come and trample on their chests.
When Ali al-Asghar was killed, Imam Hussein, he dug a grave for him, he buried him. But what happened was, on the day of Ashura, on the 11th day, when Umar ibn Sa'd's army, they wanted to move, every tribe wanted a head for them to carry.
They searched out and they said there was an infant that belonged to Al-Hussein. He brought him out. Where is he? So they looked, trying to find a fresh grave that was small, until they found near the entrance to the camp of Al-Hussein a freshly dug grave. It was Ali al-Asghar.
They took him, they severed his head, and they put it on a spear.
A little child like that, they took off his head, and then they brought him with the rest of the shuhada in order to trample his small body, maybe 6 months, 7 months narrations say, such a small body, in order to be trampled by the hooves of these wild horses. And so Umar ibn Sa'ad calls out and he says, who will volunteer to trample these bodies?
Not anyone was willing to do this. But Umar ibn Sa'ad had 10 volunteers that said they'll do it. And what's interesting is that historians have mentioned their names, all these 10 men, and all of them have been recorded to be born from illegitimate relationships. Yeah. The Imam and his companions and his soldiers, they were lined up, and these 10 knights, they trampled the bodies of the Imam along with his companions one by one, to the point that, you know, when a body is sleeping or is on the ground, it's a bit above the ground because of the width of the body. After the body was trampled, it was level to the ground. That means there wasn't a single bone in the body of Imam Hussein not shattered and not broken.
One of the Arab poets describes, he says, the horses, naturally, if you ride a horse, whenever an obstacle is presented before, what does it do? It leaps over the obstacle. He says that they had to bend, those 10 men had to bend the necks of the horses to force them to trample on the bodies of the shuhada. And that the horses were crying because they were trying to say, Sayyidi Aba Abdullah Udran, our apologies, O Master, we do not wish to do this, but it is not in our hands. And so the animals strained to avoid, to jump over the bodies. Instead, these 10 evil men forced them to trample with their hooves on the chests and bodies of these blessed shuhada.
Once all these bodies were scattered all over the battleground, it was something very, very scary. It wasn't just sadness. It was they had a mix of feelings of what's going to happen. They've lost all their loved ones, and now what's going to happen? What are they going to do to us?
أحرقوا بيوت الظالمين. He ordered for the tents of the household of Imam Hussein alayhi salam to be burnt. This is why they've narrated that all of Imam Hussein's household's tents, they were burnt except one which was left half burnt.
Umar ibn Sa'ad gave his men free rein, as if they were non-Muslims, as if they were from the Turks or from the Romans or from elsewhere, that they could attack them freely. One by one, the girls or the daughters of Rasulullah were attacked. Jewelry was taken from their ears, from their hands, from their ankles. Their clothes were snatched away. Whatever was in their tents was plundered. Fire was spread throughout the camp of Al-Hussein, so that Zainab salamullah alayhi was running around trying to gather the orphans.
They started dispersing in the desert from all sides, and Zainab salamullah alayha took on the responsibility of gathering them, collecting them, making sure they're all gathered at one specific place without missing any of the children, as per the request and the will of Al-Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam to her when he told her, Zainab, take care of my children after me and the family after me.
And this they carried out for the rest of the evening, rest of the day and the evening, attacking the household of the Prophet. They reached the tent where Imam Zain al-Abidin was laying there ill. Through the divine will of Allah, had Ali ibn al-Hussein come out to fight, he would have surely been killed. We saw a 6-month infant being killed. If Ali ibn al-Hussein had come out that day to fight, he would have been killed as well. So Allah had decreed that he would fall ill, so that he not fight, so that the message from the Prophet and the Imams would continue on to the next generations. They stood by the tent and they said, who is this son of Al-Hussein? He is Ali. Why is he still alive? Ibn Ziyad has commanded that all the sons of Al-Hussein be killed. And Shimr had taken a sword, trying to go to the Imam and attack him. Zainab came out and threw herself on Ali ibn al-Hussein, Zain al-Abidin, salamullah, and she says, if you want to kill him, you'll have to kill me first. An argument broke out between them until they asked Umar ibn Sa'ad, what shall we do? He said, he is ill. we shall take him to Ibn Ziyad and he will decide what to do with him.
The army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, they were too exhausted, so they had to stay for that night, or the night of the 11th, and then they moved one day after Ashura, which was the 11th of Muharram.
The most prized possession for the enemy that day was the head of Al-Hussein salamullahi alayhi. And so Umar ibn Sa'ad said this must reach Ibn Ziyad as soon as possible to confirm what we have done here.
Umar ibn Sa'ad sent the head of Al-Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam to go ahead of them with Khawli and Hamid ibn Muslim to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, and then he took the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih to Kufa.
Khawla was a barbarian, a ruthless, illiterate Bedouin who had no mercy in his heart. He decided to take the head of Imam Hussein to Kufa in the middle of the night.
This Khawla had two wives who were both lovers of the Ahlulbayt. So when he carried the head, the blessed head, from Karbala and moved towards Kufa, his house was outside Kufa.
So he took the head to his house.
And he placed the head, the blessed head, on a spot where a drop of blood had fallen. And the Imam Sadiq Salamullah alayhi, our sixth blessed Imam, when he went to do the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, he stopped at that place. He stopped at Al-Hanana and he prayed there, and he said, this is where the head of my grandfather al-Hussein was placed before being taken to Ibn Ziyad. Until today, there is a mashhad there. There is a small maqam for the Imam where the Imam prayed, and it is mustahab to recite a dua when you reach there and to recite prayers upon that point.
But when she saw the head of the grandson of Rasulullah, she was disgusted by Khawla.
Khawla wake up in the morning and went to see Ibn Ziyad and present him with what he had gained from this victory.
And they told him that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is sleeping, he doesn't receive anyone now. They told him, come back in the morning.
This man, Khawla or Khuli, who had taken the head of Al-Hussein and left it in his house at night, had now come to Ibn Ziyad. And he was boastful of what he had. He had the head of Al-Hussein with him, and he came to the mansion of Ibn Ziyad, and he says to him, املأ ركابي فضة أو ذهبا قتلت خير الناس أما وأبا. Fill my bags, fill my stirrup, fill my hands with silver or gold. I have killed the one who had the best of parents. And he said this before a group who were with Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad became very angry. He said to him, if you knew he was the best, why did you attack him and kill him then? If you are saying to me that he was the best of people, how have you dared to kill him then and say this before me? So this man, Khawla, who was trying to please Ibn Ziyad, was now facing the anger of Ibn Ziyad, who had him killed.
Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, the ruler of Kufa, he ordered two of the army. One was Shimr ibn al-Jawshan, the second was Muhaffaz ibn Tha'laba al-A'idi. They were in charge of the captives, of the hostages of Ahlulbayt after Ashura. They were held, they were chained by their necks and their hands and feet. They were placed on the camels.
However, these camels had no saddles. And what happened is that their legs would start bleeding because of the friction between them and the hairs of these camels.
These were the daughters of Rasulullah. These were the daughters of Al-Hussein. These were the daughters of Imam al-Mu'mineen. And they were carried on these camels without any saddles. Women and children and infants. And it was a message in order to say these people are captives. They do not deserve to have saddles. They should not be treated well. Imam Zain al-Abidin had his hands tied by chains, and his hands were tied to his neck. So his hands were in a shape very close to his chest like this, and a large iron chain was placed around his neck.
And you have to remember that Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam was also ill. He was very ill. In that sort of state, he was being tortured. He was chained down. He was in this jama'ah the whole way to Kufa, and perhaps even to Damascus. All the way to Damascus, he was in this state.
The ladies pleaded thus, for the love of Allah, please take us to those killed. when they saw how they had lost their limbs, how the spears had drank of their blood, and how the horses had trampled upon them, they screamed and beat their faces in anguish. Zainab cried out, "O Muhammad, here is Hussein in the desert, covered with blood, his limbs cut off. Here are your daughters taken captive, and your offspring slaughtered." These words caused friends and foes alike to weep, and even the horses' tears ran on their hooves. Then she put her hands under his sacred body and lifted it as she supplicated, saying, "O Lord, do accept this sacrifice from us."